Richard Prosch of Montague, Michigan. The interviewer is James Smither of Grand Valley State University. Mr. Prosch, can you start by telling us a little bit about your own background? For instance, where and when were you born?
Well, I was born March 27th, 1921 in Logansport, Indiana. And we hadn't been there very long when the family moved to Chicago area suburb.
And why did they move there?
And my father was a pharmacist,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a chance to buy into a drugstore in Berwyn, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where we ended up going there. And I really spent all the rest of my home life was spent there all the way through school.
Okay. And then when did you finish high school?
I graduated from high school in 1939, I guess it would be.
Okay. And then what did you do after that?
I went to Denison University, which is in Granville, Ohio, and graduated from there in 1943.
Now tell us about what happened when you heard about Pearl Harbor.
After Pearl Harbor, that caught us when we were home for Christmas vacation.
Mm-hmm.
We received a letter from Dean of Men indicating that the Navy had a plan that we could, if we signed up in their Navy plan, we could continue our schooling
Mm-hmm.
until we were called by the Navy to come in.
Now, had you had an interest in being in the Navy as opposed to the Army or something else, or did this just happen so you took it?
Well, I don't know. I think I would have signed up for the Navy anyhow. I guess that would be partly because of our background even here,
Mm-hmm.
because we had been very interested in all the various aquatics of sailing and swimming. And
Had you done sailing as a teenager?
we did quite a little bit of sailing and skiing in the wintertime.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been, I guess I was in Boy Scouts,
Mm-hmm.
and we did a lot of the outdoor things that took me all the way to being an Eagle Scout.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I would say that kind of a background at least turned me into wanting to do something in the war.
Right. Okay, so basically the opportunity comes up, you're able to sign up. Now, between the time when you enlisted and then the time when you finished college, did they have you do training of different kinds on the campus, or did that all wait until you were done?
No, we waited until we were done.
Okay. Now, were you following what was happening in the war at that point and paying attention to things then?
Oh, very definitely, because we were, some of our men were being in school, were gradually being going in.
Mm-hmm.
I fortunately was able to graduate on one weekend. The following Monday, I was sent to midshipman school at Notre Dame in Indiana.
All right. And what was that like?
I was there for 4 months. Went in as a just like a Navy enlisted person. And
Mm-hmm.
by the time we came out of there, then we had received our rank of ensign. I was sent to Solomon's Island, Maryland, to wait for my ship to be finished. It was being built in that area. And while we were there, we were taking additional training. And while we were doing this, was in Norfolk where we were doing
Mm-hmm.
that. And while being in some of the classes there, 2 men came in who had just come back from North Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And they were describing a program there of naval training for being a forward observer for the troops that were landing, and asking for volunteers.
Right.
And I was one of about 20 to volunteer.
Now, what motivated you to volunteer for that duty rather than going serving on a ship?
I don't know, except I knew we were anxious at that point to get into the service and start moving. So that enabled us to get in to the program faster. So at the end of, let's see, I graduated in May, went to Notre Dame for 4 months, and then by the end of December, we received our orders to go to overseas, and we went to England.
Now, before you went overseas, did they actually give you any training in how to be an artillery observer?
Oh, yes.
Okay, well, what did that consist of?
Well, pretty well, they gave us target practice. A lot of it was classroom training. They also sent us to Oklahoma, Fort Sill, which was an Army artillery school.
That was the big artillery school. Yeah.
So that we could learn the tactics of the artillery, because when we landed with 12 men. I took 6 men, and an artillery officer, captain rank, took the other 6 men, and he'd be at one end of our line, and I'd be at the other. And that, in case you were knocked out, then you would end up taking over his duty, or vice versa. And fortunately, he didn't get knocked out. So
But before you were sent over, but you didn't then have chance to actually spot for guns on naval ships.
No, well, yes and no. We, not during the training when we were in the United States, but when we got to England, we got there at the end of that year, 1943.
Yep.
Then we spent quite a few months, actually, waiting for D-Day in June.
Right. Okay. Let's back up again a little bit. Tell me about the trip across the ocean. What was that like for you?
Well, it was, thank goodness, it wasn't completely eventful. We went over on a naval troop ship called Mauritania. But on our way out of the harbor of New York, we had a scare because we were all at abandoned ship drills, standing there when a big tanker came along, ran too close, and of course you don't stop ships very fast, and we went right into him, or he ran right into us. It gave us a pretty good gash. So we turned around and went back to where we had been. And we spent, I don't know, no more than 1 or 2 days where they filled that gash up with concrete and turned us around again. And then we were able to go back to our course and went to England. And with no problem whatsoever.
So no storms and no U-boats then?
No, we fortunately made it, and we did have an escort, of course. And we landed in Liverpool, and I remember we got off there, and we were sent down down along the channel to a little tiny town called Selcombe. And that was, I'm trying to remember days, and that's pretty hard to remember immediately.
Now, when you say we, is this sort of your smaller observer unit?
Right.
Or were you part of a larger group at this point?
No, our observer unit. and there they put us in Quonset huts and continued our training there. We'd go off to different places in England,
Mm-hmm.
and then they also had an area called Slapton Sands,
Right.
and we used that almost continually until they said that we were all set to get ready to go.
Okay. So when you were training at Slapton Sands, then were you actually getting to practice landings and coordinate with
Right.
ships?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Our group would go several places, even over into Wales and that. And we would try to, well, Slapton Sands was tried to be as much as the kind of area we would be landing
Mm-hmm.
in. And they cleared out all of the people from living there, and it's amazing when we went back to visit them once after the war was over, to see that area where we had been,
Mm-hmm.
and met some of the people, and they came and interviewed us there. It was very interesting.
Now, is it a lot more developed now? Is it a resort area, or is it still pretty quiet?
You know, it was a resort area,
Mm-hmm.
Devon.
Right.
And that's pretty much was a resort area in England.
Right. Now, were you training there at the time when the German E-boats showed up? And because that was a place where a lot of servicemen got killed in one of those training exercises.
Right. We were right next to where that ship.
Mm-hmm.
It was an LST,
Mm-hmm.
as I remember it. It was caught by a German gunboat, I think,
Yeah.
and torpedoed it. And there's quite a few men, I don't know, something like 500
Mm-hmm.
men or more that were killed. And they took the rest of them and that were hospitalized in a little area. I remember because they went to a Army Station Hospital, which was kept secret because they were afraid that some of these men would be infiltrated by spies,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd let off too much.
Right.
So that was why they kept close track of them there.
Now, once you're going to get through your training, and then do you remember about how long the period was when you were actually waiting for the invasion to happen? Were you kind of sitting around the base for a long time, or?
No, we didn't sit very much at all,
Mm-hmm.
because we kept training until finally we went with various different groups to do the practice landing. And then we would actually have with live ammunition
Mm-hmm.
that would be landing, and we would be spotting.
Right.
And there was one time one of our men who was calling the shots ended up getting it in reverse, so the shells were landing behind us.
Oh.
Which was rather scary.
Mm-hmm.
But that was able to turn it around
Mhm.
before there were many casualties. But we did things like that, and we ended up at the end by training with the 1st Division.
Mm-hmm.
And they told us then that was the division we'd land
Right.
with.
Right. Now, what kind of equipment did you have, or what kind of system did you have for communicating with ships?
It was strictly radio equipment. And the men that we used were actually from the Big Red One
Mm-hmm.
artillery.
Right.
And they were radio men, not Navy radio men.
Right.
And they were trained to do, and we had a grid system,
Mm-hmm.
which had some prearranged targets that they knew
Right.
there were. And then from then on, if we were firing anything else other than the targets, that was perfectly allowed too.
Mm-hmm.
You never know how accurate you were,
Right.
except I know one we knocked out just a machine gun nest that we were aware of. And
Okay. Well, that part's getting a little bit ahead of us again in the story.
Yeah.
Let's going to go back to the point where you finished up the training. You're waiting for the invasion to happen.
Right.
What was it like those few days there before you actually go over?
Well, you don't mean going all the way from back in the United States?
No. Going across the channel.
Yeah.
Because right before that, did they close down the bases and lock you all up? And...
we knew we were getting ready to go when they pretty well shut down our unit, and we had to eat either rations or anything from our immediate kitchens. And at that time, it was a sealed situation. And I know while we were doing that, we were in our Quonset hut during a bombing raid. And one of the bombs came pretty close to where we were, just about knocked all of us out of our beds, which we should have been in there, what they call them,
the bomb shelter?
Bomb shelter. Yeah. But we got there pretty quick. But outside of that, they unfortunately knocked out one of our Piper observation planes, so which meant we wouldn't have that ability to use with the landing itself.
Right.
And then they moved us from there to our the landing ship that we would be going in on. I have no idea what the name or number of that was, but we took off from, now I'm trying to remember the name of the town. Anyhow, they loaded us on the ships there, and we stayed there an extra day because of the weather.
Right.
And then our ship pulled out from Weymouth Harbor.
Okay.
That's it. And went from Weymouth Harbor and went over towards the Isle of Wight. And at that point, we turned a complete, straight for the beaches.
Now, at what point did you know where you were going? When did they tell you that?
Well, we pretty well were in on a lot of, not exactly when, but because we were in control of our unit, they had to know when and what we could do. On D-Day itself, we laid out on the edge of the beaches for several hours. We were supposed to be in much earlier, but we ended up getting off of our ship, and instead of being able to go right in, they got LCVTs, or what they call it, landing ship personnel. We climbed down cargo nets to get into those, and then we went around for one or two circles and then went straight in.
Do you know why you were delayed?
Just because it was backed up. There was no place to even come in until they could call us in.
All right. Now, before they actually loaded you onto those boats, what could you see or hear of the invasion?
We couldn't see that much, but we could sure hear the bombardment that was going on. And incidentally, one funny thing that happened on our way in wasn't that funny, but it was to us then. There's about, I don't remember how many there were 20, 25, 30 men, all standing up, all battle loaded, you know. And one of the men started to get sick, and he jumped up on the gunwale, and he missed the top of it, and with that, he got sick and flopped back. And he spewed all of us with a few of his as I say, it wasn't very funny to him or to us, but it was funny to think about it later.
Right. Now, one of the sort of stories that circulates or whatever, apparently General Montgomery, who was nominally in charge of the whole invasion,
Yeah.
gave orders that everybody was supposed to have a big bacon and egg breakfast, a full Monty breakfast.
Yeah.
Now, did they actually serve that on the ship you were on?
I don't remember that. We didn't have a breakfast like that.
Okay.
I don't remember whether we had rations. I know we didn't. We had rations that we carried with us.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was K rations.
Mm-hmm.
We had two or three of those, and they gave us a chocolate bar, which was had vitamins
Mm-hmm.
and everything, including a laxative, the whole works. We had that, of course. I know as we hit the beach with our LCVP, they put the ramp down, and I had all my men nestled around where we were,
Mm-hmm.
unwrapping their guns and so forth, and it was a little hard to get them motivated because right there where we were laying, there was it looked like a major who obviously was an engineer
Mm-hmm.
at the time. Very, very well dressed, polished boots, and
Mm-hmm.
swaggering, sticking his hand with a bullet hole right in his head.
Mm-hmm.
And these men were transfixed by that. And I finally was able to get them moving.
Mm-hmm. Now, was there a lot of fire coming across the beach when
Oh.
you got there?
It was a mess, real terrible. We were able to they had several bunches
Mm-hmm.
of men that were all congregating, and then they would go up single file.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that it was, way it was able to know where to go, it was literally cleared by men sacrificing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as they got hit or killed or wounded, they ran white tape up to
Mhm.
where he was. And then we'd go on beyond that until another one was hit.
Now, is this on the beach, or is it going up the bluff, or?
Going up a bluff, it
Okay.
wasn't a sharp, not like the Rangers had, they went
Yeah, well, it wasn't a straight cliff, but it was
No,
kind of a sand
no.
dune sort of thing, or?
right.
All right. Now,
I,
how do you have a sense about how wide the beach itself was? I mean, how much did you have to cross to get there?
well, it was pretty wide, I know that, and they had naval officers called beach masters
Mhm.
that would try to direct the men into where they wanted us to go up.
Right. So there was at least some organization by the time
right,
you got there.
Right. I remember telling my men to stay where they were while I ran over to the beach master
Mhm.
and asked him where they wanted my men to go, and
Mhm.
told him what our job was, and that we were trying to get up there so we could start knocking out some of this horrible fire.
Mhm.
And he told us to grab my men and bring them around, and we went right up without waiting.
Mhm.
And
And was
thank
it?
goodness we did, because after we got in, it was halfway up, and the shells started coming in right, hitting those men right where we
Right where
should
you'd
have
been.
been.
Okay. Was there any cover at all on the beach,
Well,
or other than were there, I mean, knocked out vehicles, or was there a shingle there, sort of a pile of stones along the water line that was a little higher than the rest, or do you not remember any of that stuff?
I don't remember. We fortunately didn't have those obstacles that
Mhm.
they put in
Okay.
that were cleared out by
Right.
the Navy SEALs earlier.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to get all the way in and drop our. Some of them didn't get all the way in, and
Mhm.
they let the men off in water.
Right.
That was bad news.
So the guy piloting your landing craft did his job right and got you
Right.
to where he was
He
supposed
got us
to.
in.
And so you may have had a better Omaha Beach experience than a lot of people did, as far as
we
that
did.
went.
I mean, it made you feel, not that you could even think about this until after it was all over, it made you feel as though you're sitting there watching a movie
Mm-hmm.
and realizing everything you're looking down at was real.
Right.
I remember there was a small tank, not a big one, but a smaller one, and he was racing across the beach in front of us on fire.
Mm-hmm.
And it was mostly because they had all these gas tanks strapped on the top of them.
Right.
And they had to be getting cooked inside because it didn't go too far and it stopped.
Right.
And it didn't move.
Okay.
Things like that. You could see the shells dropping in front of you and hitting some of these small landing craft.
Right.
Or next to them and so forth, and it was utterly chaos from that standpoint.
Okay. Now, did all of your men make it across the beach there to start going
I
up?
was able to get it. I don't know about the others. I didn't hear from him until we got all the way up and started.
So were you with 6 men, or did you have the
6
yeah?
men.
So you had your half of the unit. Okay. Now, and they had all their equipment with them.
Yes.
And were they? And then did you wait until you got up to the top before you tried to set it up and start working?
We were delayed somewhat trying to get up there. Obviously, when we got to the top, our point then I was trying to find the I don't know, would be the command post where our men would be told what they wanted us to do. I remember the name of the man that I was looking for, and it was a little bit, well, I don't remember the exact details now. I remember walking down the road one time and looking up, and there was one solitary airplane with German markings on it. Looked like he was racing like mad to get out of there. And I don't think he made it home. We had complete air cover.
Right. Yeah.
So we were very fortunate that way. And after finding my command post and being with them for just a couple of hours or so, they asked us to, or at least not my group, to go back, almost back to the Corps headquarters near the beach, and we were reassigned to the 2nd Division, who was coming in.
Had you, were you able to do any spotting for the 1st Division there on the day you landed?
Very little, but I did. I think it was just in a matter of 1 or 2 days, because then the 2nd Division came in and we went with them, and that was the thing that was so noticeable, being with the 1st Division, who had already been in North Africa.
Right.
They would be what we called battle-wise, and they knew pretty well what was incoming, what was outgoing, and they didn't drop on the ground every moment because they could tell. But we went to 2nd Division, and they were real neophytes because they were jumpy for everything.
Right. Could we go back just a little bit more to the 1st Division again, and on that first day, what kind of targets could you call in for them? What sort of help could you give them?
The only thing that we did get was, they say, that machine nest. And here again, I don't know exactly what the outcome it was, except that it stopped firing.
Right. But you were calling into a destroyer offshore.
Yes.
And now, do you have a sense of how close the destroyers got to the shoreline?
Well, they were, I don't know how they could do it, but they were so close. They would run on an elliptical, and they would have the 5-inch guns pointed towards the beach, both ways. I mean, the only time when they were unable to do anything is when they were in the turret.
Right.
But then.
So they use pretty much direct fire straight into the pillboxes?
Right.
Yeah.
I think, if I remember correctly, I think the Bald One was the name of the ship that I had, was to direct. And I do remember there was a French cruiser behind that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was called the Montcalm.
Mm-hmm.
I think I still have some of the papers and so forth, and I still have them in a box up in the attic now, because 2 or 3 years ago I had a history teacher at the high school, had a class was at the end of the school year, which would be about May or June, and he asked if I would come and talk to them. It was an interesting thing. The only thing, the biggest question they always ask was, how many men did you kill?
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately I could tell them, because of the nature that I had, I didn't. I said, I obviously did probably kill some, but I said, I fortunately don't know how many, because of the kind of firing that we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
But I said, I fortunately came through okay.
Okay. So you make it through the first day, and then you're reassigned to the 2nd Division. And then what kind of work now were you doing for them?
Well, it was supposed to be the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really do hardly any firing for them, because they weren't in a position to be doing that.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember noticing how little they knew about the gunfire coming. I can
Right.
remember seeing as we were going along, they were dropping all kinds of things, like an extra pair of boots, anything that would be dragging them down.
Right.
We did, were able to get through the first day, and we dug down as big a trench as we possibly could, right along a bunker, one of these high bunkers.
Right.
It was awfully hard to really spot with those things because they were so high.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you got to the top, it was, you had to be careful because there were snipers looking up. And I do remember hearing a story that was funny later thinking about it, but I remember while I was laying there and just daydreaming about what was going on, I heard it clump, 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 and I thought, that's got to be a paratrooper, because G2 intelligence had passed the word to us that they might possibly be landing paratroopers behind our lines. And so all they needed to do was know that, and you'd be fully alarmed about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I sure thought that was me for going to be having to fight somebody hand to hand. So I had the kind of carbine. I put the safety off, and the hair standing up on the back of my head, I know. And all of a sudden, out of the night was not, it wasn't pretty, but I could see the image of a cow.
Mm-hmm.
And the clump, clump, clump was the cow. And I couldn't believe it. But that's another funny incident.
All right.
I almost killed a cow.
Yeah, you're not the only one. There were a lot of cows in Normandy, and
Yes,
a lot of them kind of got in the way, especially at night.
Yes, they were.
All right. What did the countryside look like in that area as you started to head inland a little bit with the 2nd Division?
Well, it was a very beautiful area. Of course, you didn't stop and think about the foliage.
Right.
Excuse me, but I had stuff dropped in my eyes, and they tear a lot.
Was there much sign of battle damage in that area, or from the
Oh, yes.
bombardment and that kind of thing?
Yeah, the bombardment and the planes overhead had really done quite a job. Of course, naturally, there was still some there. But I can't think of anything heroic that I did. The only thing that I do remember, sort of scary at the time, I asked the men to stay still where I was, and I crawled along the line there, and when I got to the other side, maybe 15, 20 yards away from them, I took my helmet off and took my carbine and raised my helmet to where it would be if they'd fire at it, and hoping that my men would see it and radio to where they was. Fortunately, I didn't have to do anything more than that because I didn't get shot at.
Okay. Now, were you normally working directly with a group of infantrymen, or did you kind of operate off on your own, or how did that work?
Well, not completely on our own. Their CP command post would tell us which way they were going to go, and to keep them clear of the enemy if we could. We were in a matter of 28 days, and at that point, they even suggested that we might go, and because we were out of range by that time, that we might even run over and help the 4th Division on the Utah Beach, I think it was.
Right.
But we never did get there. We got back to England on an LST, returning with wounded men. And we got to England on the way back, and any of our men that were wounded were sent back to the United States.
Right.
And several men made up a small unit and went down to come up from the bottom.
Right, the landings in the south of France then, yeah.
And my group, they reformed our command post, our group, and put us in with a signal group called JASCO, Joint Assault Signal Group. And that was we would stay under that command when we got over to the Pacific.
Okay. All right. What was the trip back across the Atlantic like? Was that any more eventful than the one going out, or?
Yeah, that was rather interesting. We had gotten orders from Allied headquarters in London that our group would be sent back, and we went back on the Queen Mary. And of course, it was pretty well stripped of everything,
Right.
just for a troop ship. But it just coincidentally turned out to be the same trip that Churchill was going back. I think that was to a group called Halifax, where it was that particular summit meeting. We stayed in the harbor for about 10 days while they took all the living quarters and made it into something a little easier for Churchill and his group to stand, not like what we were living in.
Right.
Which was, it's understandable. After all, it was pretty important. And we were also quite fortunate because we had complete air control and everything when we went back. When we did land in Halifax, only after he got in and got to where he was supposed to go.
Yeah. Did you ever actually see him in the flesh, or did you just know he was on the boat?
No, we saw him as he was getting off when we were there. I know there was a British officer standing next to me, and he said, he said, I understand why we're not able to get off, but he said, I can almost see my house right over the hill there. And he had to go stay in, went all the way to New York and then back, and, which is understandable too.
Okay. Now, once they got you back across the Atlantic, what did you do when you got to the States?
Well, as soon as we got off that ship, we were given orders to go by rail to back to where our home base would be, with orders to be in San Francisco by a certain date, which was about 10 days. So we were able to spend about 10 days delay en route
Mm-hmm.
in our home, which was in this area. There I was able to contact my sweetheart at the time, and we dated almost every day during those 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
By the end of the 10 days, we were engaged.
Okay. Well, how did you wind up in Michigan if you were growing up in Berwyn, Illinois?
Well, that goes back to I came up to see my then wife. Her name was Charlene. They called her Sharky,
Mm-hmm.
and she'd been coming up here
Okay.
almost all of her life, and so they had this house here is actually built on the floor of that old cottage.
Mm-hmm.
With extra things added on to
Right.
it. Dining room was extra, and sunroom was extra, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But we've been coming up in summertime, or sending my wife up
Right.
here. So it's been 62 years of married life. My wife died a year ago in
Mm-hmm.
March. And so, but I'm still here,
Right.
and it's a beautiful place, as you can see.
Okay. So you get up here now. Did you get formally engaged at that point, or?
Formally engaged before I got her a ring,
Mm-hmm.
and then she wrote, of course, while I was in the New Guinea area.
Mm-hmm.
We only made one landing there, which was really a walk-in.
Mm-hmm.
I think we lost one man, not because of enemy fire, but we were going in on a tracked vehicle, which was open like a
Mm-hmm.
like a landing craft,
Right.
and it I don't know what hit something. Anyhow, we tipped over,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the men was crushed pretty badly.
Okay. Again, that's sort of jumping ahead of us a little bit in the story. So we're going to go back. Okay, you finish your leave or whatever in Michigan, and then from Michigan, then where did you go to ship out to the Pacific?
San Francisco.
Okay. And then,
It was on board a Coast Guard ship
mm-hmm.
called the Shaw, USS Shaw.
About how big a boat was that?
It was a moderately good-sized troop ship.
Mm-hmm.
I know some of the experiences we had on that as we crossed the equator.
Mm-hmm.
Those of us who had never crossed the equator before were entered into the community, or I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
We were given a slip of paper indicating we were now a member of an elite group that
Right.
has crossed the equator.
And now, did you sail directly to New Guinea, or did you stop other places along the way?
We landed in Hollandia, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't do anything there, but when we got our orders to move on up, I remember we were sitting there all ready to go. It was raining, it was nice red clay, it was
Mhm.
pretty muddy, and we were a sloppy mess, but we finally we got up and went to, I forget now exactly where the next stop we did. We didn't do any firing
Mhm.
at all in that area. And even when we got up to the top at San Sapor, which was almost the top,
Mm-hmm.
the only thing is we did join the 6th Division there. We were going with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we got to the San Sapor, we were there for maybe 5 or 6 days before we took off to go to Lingayen Gulf.
Mm-hmm. And that's in the Philippines.
Yes, and we did some firing there, but mostly our firing were as we were going along the Gulf area.
Mm-hmm.
I know our group was sent with a small group up towards Baguio, I guess it was, which is a real nice resort area for the Philippines.
Right.
And we fired at several holes in the walls of small mountains,
Right.
thinking that they might be supply dumps and so forth. And we had a lot of them, but I don't know whatever they had in it, whether it was troops or whether it was just the supplies.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't stay in Baguio. We went back right away.
And then did you spend much time then on shore in the Philippines, or
Well,
what did you do after that?
the 6th Division moved out. We're heading for Manila.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing really to fire on when they were going that way. It was strictly their battle. And we set up a sort of a semi-permanent base there right off the beach, waiting to go to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing I know we do, I was in a 2-man tent. It was pretty lush quarters at that point, sleeping on a cot with netting over us to keep the mosquitoes away. And that was sort of an ironic thing too. My bunkmate at the time was from Mulberry, Florida. He'd been there all of his life, and he ignored taking the pills that they gave us, Atabrine, I think it was called. And as a result, he never got malaria.
Mm-hmm.
And I took my Atabrine religiously, and I did get malaria.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Do you think you picked it up in the Philippines, or would it have been in
I think
New Guinea, or came? Oh,
Philippines somewhere.
okay.
I had it pretty bad.
Okay. Now, how did your time in active duty wind up ending? What kind of caused you to leave the Philippines when you did?
Well, we've been sitting there for a long time, and we knew pretty well it was going to be sort of just a long wait. I finally had this wrist of my right hand was pretty well useless because it obviously had been broken. We thought at the time. So after sitting there for a while, I said, I think I better try and get this taken care of while we're not doing anything. So I went down to Manila, which was already captured by that time, to a hospital there. And actually the hospital they sent me to was on board a ship on Samar Island. And it was called the HMS Tijalinka, which was a Dutch ship with Chinese crew, and the doctors were all British doctors. And they indicated that I had my problem was Kienbock's disease, although I don't think that was actually diagnosed until I got to the hospital at Great Lakes. But they did slap my arm in a cast, and unfortunately they didn't have any coverings between the cast and my skin. By the time I got to Hawaii, where they flew us there, and we stayed there for several days. And I know I spent almost all my day in the hospital area soaking this and trying to get rid of the jungle rot
Right.
that it had, because when they put that on right next to the skin, there was no protection,
Mm-hmm.
and it was looked pretty, almost like leprosy when they took that
Yeah.
out.
Now, were you having attacks of malaria at the same time
yeah,
too?
yeah. There's nothing too much you can really do with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a reoccurring thing, and it can be real bad one day, and the next day you feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't get rid of malaria until, if you can ever stay good before it recurs and knocks you down.
Mm-hmm.
If you can be well enough for several days, then it won't knock you down.
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow, that was my curse of the situation.
Yeah, not the best way to spend your time in Hawaii,
No,
probably.
no, I didn't.
All right.
Didn't see anything pretty about
Right.
it at all.
Okay. And then where did you go after Hawaii?
Then I was sent from Samar and flew to Oakland, California.
Mm-hmm.
The day that we landed in Oakland was the day of the first atom bomb.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew then, or we all knew then pretty well, that was going to be the end, and we wouldn't have to go back. So they sent me from there to Great Lakes Naval Hospital.
Was that in Chicago at the naval base?
Chicago.
Yeah.
They tried to send the boys in the closest hospital to where they lived.
Mm-hmm.
So Chicago was good for me.
Right. And then how long did they keep you in the hospital when you got there?
Well, it wasn't that bad. They did operate,
Mm-hmm.
take the bone out.
Right.
It was bad. And scrape the bones on each side that were dying too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it was diagnosed as Kienbach's disease. But because I had that on my written or physical order, some of the doctors who were first-year doctors didn't really know what that was.
Mm-hmm.
And they put me in they didn't put me in an orthopedic ward where I really should have gone.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't get taken care of quite as in the same manner as I should have been.
Right.
But it worked out all right in the end, but they wasted a little time on that. I knew I called my dad at pharmacy and asked him to bring me some quinine, I guess it was, for the
Malaria.
because they were really wanted to treat me for yellow jaundice,
Mm-hmm.
which it wasn't, but I kept telling them I know enough to know about it. That was not what the problem was. But because I was so yellow
Mm-hmm.
from taking all
Well, the Atabrine made you
Atabrine.
yellow too, yeah.
that's what made him misread what it was.
All right. Now, once they let you out of the hospital, what did you do next?
Well, I still had a little time left, and they could use, they could go ahead and still use
Mm-hmm.
until you were really out. And I went to the Chicago Board of Trade building. I think that's where it was. And I was with a group of supply officers and men that were writing off all kinds of equipment
Mm-hmm.
that were in warehouses and for sale. If the right people came along, and I guess they had some kind of a listing of what's available.
Mm-hmm.
I keep using the word gloves because I remember selling thousands of pairs of gloves and any other material like that. I remember also that we sold a lot of Army pink material. That's what they called their pants that would look like pink. And I remember getting enough to make a pair of pants for myself.
Mm-hmm. All right. And so when do they finally discharge you? You think it was sort of the beginning of early 46 then, or did you stay
Yeah,
on?
it was in July.
Okay, so you stayed on some time then after
Right.
that was over.
At that time, we were living in Glenview,
Mm-hmm.
Illinois, at the Air Force
Right.
Base right there. And we ended up buying a home in Glenview.
And then what line of work did you go into after you'd gotten out of the service then?
I went to work for Curtis Candy Company in their merchandise, Baby Rose and Butterfinger, and I did that for about 2 years. And then my father bought another drugstore, which was number 3, and he said, "Why don't you come back in with me, and you don't have to be a registered pharmacist to order the equipment and do the advertising." But I hadn't been there more than 6 months, and I knew that wasn't going to work because the store I was working in was in the hospital, Berwyn McNeil Hospital. It was a commercial building for us on the first floor, and the doctors asked me questions about something pharmaceutically, and I couldn't answer. And the more I did that, the more embarrassed I got. So I told my dad, if I'm really going to do this, I've got to go back to school. So fortunately, the School of Pharmacy, the School of Medicine, and the School of Dentistry were all in the Illinois Research Hospital. So it was a hop, skip, and a jump
Right.
for me to go from. And by that time, we had purchased a home in Riverside, Illinois, and the Bluebird bus stopped just about 2 blocks away, and it also stopped right at the hospital. So I did that for 4 more years, which was not the easiest thing because I was all through being a student
Right.
at that time, and I tried to get into that mode. Was not easy.
And what had your original degree been in?
Just, economics.
Okay. Yeah. So it wasn't something that had a lot of the science and the math or things
No,
that you might
no.
need to train to be a pharmacist.
Right, no, so I got very little credit for anything.
All right. And then basically, did that become your career? Did you stay in pharmacy?
Yeah, right, I did that for 28 years. And at that point, my dad had passed away. And by that time, our 2 oldest boys were pretty well in finishing college. And my wife said that it was not very much fun for her when the boys were not home, and I would be working those goofy hours.
Right.
She said, "I don't have anybody to talk to all day long, 6, 7 days a week." So we started thinking about Michigan. So when we really got serious, why we said, "Let's take the move." So I sold out 1 store. When Dad died, there were 3 stores, and I got 1 of them, and my brother and sister took over control of the other 2. So I finally ended up took the money from that, and I came up here and started a business called, we call it Prosch Medical Supply, but it was really a equipment store.
Right.
With hospital beds and all that sort of thing. And we went to an outfit in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who came up with the idea of going to drugstores and asking them if you will dedicate a certain amount of the square feet in your store, we'll send you some equipment on a consignment.
Right.
And as you sell it, you make the money, but you have to buy from us to replenish it. And we did that for quite a while, and it was getting to look pretty good, so I said, why don't we buy them out if we can?
Mm-hmm.
That's when we had more guts and brains, but it worked out pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
However, at the end of about 10 years, the hospitals decided that why don't they make the money instead of us? So I literally was put out of business that way. But fortunately I had, and I don't know, this was just luck, I had one of the pharmaceutical companies called Marion Laboratories out of Kansas City owned one of their companies they owned was a electric wheelchair company. And so I went ahead and studied the use of that
Mm-hmm.
by going to Lansing, because we came under the auspices of the state elevator board. And they told me I could do that if I would pass their test.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, I did that, and that here again was the hospitals got into our knickers, so to speak. But fortunately, after that, I was able to hook up with a young man out of Kalamazoo, Michigan, McNally Elevator Company. So we got putting in small elevators. There was we had absolutely no inventory and no accounts payable at that point.
Okay. I got the tape being just about
So,
out
well,
here.
that's just about where we